The warning signal. The galaxy was quiet, too quiet. Deep in the reaches of human space, scientists monitoring the stars picked up something unusual. A warning signal. It wasn't human, nor was it from any allied species. It was sharp, loud, and carried a message that made hearts stop. The Galactic Empire, known for its brutal conquests and massive fleet, had set its sights on humanity. This was no ordinary message. It came with a chilling ultimatum: surrender or face destruction. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had ruled the stars. They crushed civilizations, leaving nothing but ruins. Alien races trembled at their name, their fleets unmatched in size and power. Now they were heading toward Earth's colonies, confident that humans would be just another name on their long list of conquests. In command centers across human space, leaders and military officials gathered to discuss the threat. Large holographic displays showed images of the approaching fleet. It was massive. Thousands of ships armed with weapons that could wipe out planets. The sight alone sent shivers down spines. Some argued for surrender. "We can't win against them," one official said, pacing nervously. "They've crushed civilizations far more advanced than us." Others, however, refused to bow. "We are not cowards," a general declared. "If they think we'll roll over, they don't know who they're dealing with." Amid the chaos, the mysterious silence of human ships caught everyone's attention. These were not ordinary ships, hidden in secret locations, away from prying eyes. They were unlike anything humanity had built before. Engineers had been working on them for years, developing technology no one believed could be possible. One man, Captain Elias Grant, stood quietly in the corner of the command room, watching the debates unfold. He was a decorated officer, known for keeping a level head in the worst situations. "Let them come," he finally said, breaking the tension. "We'll give them a surprise they'll never forget." As the Empire's fleet drew closer, fear spread among the colonies. People packed their belongings, fleeing to safer locations. Children asked their parents if the aliens would destroy their homes. The mood was heavy, but behind the scenes, human engineers and military leaders were preparing for something extraordinary. The human fleet was small compared to the Empire's, but it was ready. Captains across the colonies received coded orders. They nodded, their faces calm, and began mobilizing their ships. These were not the lumbering vessels the Empire expected. They were sleek, fast, and carried weapons the aliens had never seen before. And then came the laughter. In response to the Empire's message, humans sent back a short video. It wasn't a formal reply. It wasn't a plea for peace. It was a simple recording of human crews laughing, some doubled over, others pointing mockingly. The message read, "We heard your terms. No thanks." It spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Empire's leaders were furious. "What is this madness?" the Emperor demanded, slamming his fist on the arm of his throne. "How dare these primitives mock us?" The Empire had expected fear, surrender, and begging for mercy. Instead, they were met with defiance. The laughter only made them angrier. But it wasn't just arrogance fueling humanity's response. There was something behind the laughter, a secret. The engineers working in hidden facilities smiled knowingly as they activated systems never seen before. The human fleet began moving into position, and the first steps of Project Iron Teeth were underway. Back in the command room, Captain Grant looked at the holographic display. The alien fleet was enormous, but he wasn't intimidated. "They think they've already won," he said, his voice steady. "That's their first mistake." As the alien fleet crossed into human space, the countdown began. Ships powered up their shields, weapons locked on targets, and crews prepared for the fight of their lives. Everyone knew the odds were against them, but no one seemed afraid. Why? Because they had a plan. Humanity wasn't going to fight this battle on the Empire's terms. They weren't going to rely on brute strength or outdated tactics. No, they had something far better. Their minds, their creativity, and their ability to turn the impossible into reality. The warning signal that had once sent shivers down spines now seemed like a distant memory. Humanity was ready, and they were going to show the galaxy exactly what they were made of. And so, as the Empire's fleet drew closer, the human crews laughed again, this time with a confidence that sent chills down the spines of their enemies. The stage was set. The battle was about to begin. But this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a message to the galaxy. Humanity doesn't kneel. We stand, we fight, and we laugh in the face of danger. The Empire's confidence. The Galactic Empire had conquered countless worlds. Their fleet, vast and powerful, was unmatched in the galaxy. From the icy moons of the outer systems to the sprawling metropolises of advanced civilizations, the Empire's flag flew high. Every race they encountered had folded under their strength, kneeling before their overwhelming firepower. Humans, they believed, would be no different. Inside the Empire's War Command Center, a room the size of a stadium, high-ranking alien officials gathered around holographic displays. The human colonies flickered on the screen like tiny specks of dust. The Emperor himself sat at the head of the table, eyes narrowed as he gazed upon the map of human space. A tall, sleek alien admiral named Voker stood confidently beside the Emperor. His voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable arrogance. The human's response is nothing but childish defiance. We have nothing to fear. Their technology is outdated by at least 2 centuries. Their ships are no match for our destroyers. We will overwhelm them in hours. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Other commanders chuckled, exchanging smug glances. After all, this wasn't their first conquest. Still, Voker continued, a sly smile curling his lips. It would be entertaining to crush their spirits. Perhaps a full planetary bombardment on their outer colonies, a reminder of their insignificance. The Emperor nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the image of Earth, rotating slowly in the display. Make an example of them. Voker, the Emperor commanded. But I want survivors. Let them live to spread the story of what happens when you defy the Empire. Voker bowed. Consider it done. Days later, the first wave of the Empire's fleet arrived near a human colony on the edge of space. Thousands of ships, armed to the teeth, formed an unbreakable wall in orbit. The colony below was small, mostly a mining outpost, with only a few defensive cannons scattered across the surface. Inside the Empire's command ship, Voker stood at the bridge, arms crossed. His eyes scanned the planet below with disinterest. No defenses worth mentioning, one of his officers reported. Their planetary shield is weak. One salvo should break through. Voker didn't even blink. Prepare to fire. But before the command could leave his lips, something strange happened. Human ships appeared. They didn't arrive through the usual warp lanes. They didn't show up on long-range sensors. One moment the sky was clear, and the next, several sleek human vessels hovered in low orbit, facing the Empire's fleet head-on. The human ships were smaller than the Empire's destroyers, oddly shaped, with dark, jagged designs. They lacked the polished, symmetrical appearance of the Empire's pristine vessels. Voker's officers scrambled to analyze the ships. "They're odd," one officer muttered. "Smaller, but energy readings are unstable. We can't get a clear reading." Voker smiled faintly. "Unstable. That means fragile. This will be easier than I thought." He stepped forward, activating the ship-wide communication line. His voice echoed through space, broadcasting to the human vessels. "This is Admiral Voker of the Galactic Empire. Surrender your ships and abandon your colony. You cannot win." A moment of silence followed. Then, to Vokar's surprise, the human ships responded. Laughter. The sound wasn't just from one ship. It came from all of them. Crew members, captains, and officers laughing uncontrollably. Some pounded their consoles in amusement. Others wheezed, unable to contain themselves. Voker's eyes narrowed. Are they mocking us? One human voice cut through the laughter, calm, but laced with humor. "Surrender. Admiral, I think you're the one who should reconsider. We've been waiting for you." Volker scowled. "Fire on them. Now." His fleet obeyed, launching a barrage of plasma and energy blasts at the human ships. Bright streaks of light shot through space, slamming directly into the lead human vessel. Nothing happened. The human ship sat there, undamaged. The energy blasts rippled harmlessly off its surface, as if they had struck empty space. The officers aboard Volker's command ship panicked, frantically adjusting their weapon systems. Direct hit registered, Admiral, but no effect. Volker's hands gripped the edge of the console. Impossible. The humans continued to laugh. One of their captains appeared on the display, casually leaning back in his chair, smirking. "Try again, Admiral. Maybe you just need to aim better." Volker's face darkened with rage. "All ships, fire everything you have." Thousands of beams lit up the darkness of space, converging on the human vessels. The colony below watched in silence, bracing for the inevitable destruction. But when the light faded, the human ships were still there, untouched. The voice returned, light-hearted but with a dangerous edge. "Admiral, you brought the biggest fleet you could find, didn't you?" Volker didn't respond. "That was your second mistake," the human captain continued. "Your first mistake was thinking we'd play by your rules." For the first time in his long career, Volker felt fear. The confidence he once held slipped away, replaced by a growing, gnawing uncertainty. The humans weren't just resisting. They were toying with him. First contact. Unseen power. The Empire's fleet floated silently in orbit, weapons still glowing from the barrage they had unleashed moments earlier. But in the cold darkness of space, the human ships remained untouched, shimmering faintly as if wrapped in a thin layer of unseen energy. Admiral Volker stood frozen on the bridge of his command ship, unable to tear his eyes away from the display. The lead human vessel hovered directly in front of his fleet, a jagged shadow against the light of the colony below. His officers whispered nervously behind him, their usual confidence replaced by confusion. "It doesn't make sense, Admiral," one stammered. "Our weapons connected. I saw it with my own eyes. But it's like they didn't even notice." Volker's gaze narrowed, but he said nothing. His mind raced for explanations. Cloaking technology. Advanced shielding. The humans weren't supposed to have this level of capability. His intelligence reports described their fleet as primitive, functional, but outdated. And yet, here they stood, untouched, smiling. "Admiral," another officer interrupted cautiously, "we've intercepted their internal communications." Volker turned sharply. "What are they saying?" The officer hesitated. They're still laughing, sir." The bridge fell into an uneasy silence. Volker's lips pressed into a thin line as he leaned closer to the display, narrowing his eyes at the lead human vessel. "Open a channel," he ordered. The communication officer hesitated but complied. A soft chime echoed through the bridge as the link connected. Moments later, the face of a human captain flickered onto the screen. Captain Elias Grant smiled lazily, arms crossed, leaning casually against his command chair. His uniform was crisp, but his demeanor was almost bored. Behind him, members of his crew chuckled softly as if someone had just told a joke. "Admiral Volker," Elias greeted, his voice calm and friendly. "I see you've met our little fleet." Volker straightened, his tone cold. "Your fleet is insignificant. Surrender your colony and ships immediately. You cannot win." Elias raised an eyebrow, glancing over his shoulder at his crew. "Did he say win?" he asked, and the bridge erupted into quiet laughter once again. Volker's hands clenched into fists. Elias turned back to the screen, his smile never fading. "Look, Admiral, I get it. You've probably steamrolled dozens of civilizations by now. You show up, wave those big guns around, and everyone drops to their knees." His eyes hardened slightly. "But you're not dealing with them. You're dealing with us." Volker stepped forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "This is not a game, Captain. I will give you one final chance. Stand down, or your colony will burn." Elias didn't blink. "Admiral, you've already fired everything you've got. And we're still here." Volker's jaw tightened. He motioned to his weapons officer. "Charge the main cannon. I want that ship wiped from existence." As his crew scrambled to obey, Elias's voice came through again, softer this time. "Before you do that, let me ask you something, Admiral." Volker hesitated, glancing back at the screen. Elias's expression shifted slightly, the humor fading just enough for a trace of steel to shine through. "Did you ever wonder why we let you find us?" Volker froze. "Why we let you find us?" The words hung in the air like a lid weight. Volker's officers exchanged uneasy glances. "Humans are clever, Admiral," Elias continued, leaning forward. "We've been studying you for years. We knew the Empire would come for us eventually. So we prepared." On the display, the human ships began to shift, almost casually rearranging themselves into a new formation. Their movements were precise, calculated, as if they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "You came here expecting an easy victory," Elias said, his eyes narrowing. "But you've walked into something else entirely." Without warning, the human ships vanished. The Empire's bridge erupted into chaos. Alarms blared as officers scrambled to locate them. "They're gone," one officer shouted, slamming his hands on the console. "No warp signatures. No cloaking signals. They just disappeared." Volker's eyes darted around the display, searching for any sign of the human fleet. His heart pounded, but he forced his voice to remain steady. "Scan the area. They can't have gone far." But before the scans could complete, a new alarm cut through the bridge. This one sharp and piercing. "Admiral, multiple energy signatures detected directly above us." Volker's head snapped up just as the display shifted. The human fleet had reappeared, directly behind his command ship. Elias's voice returned, soft and almost playful. "Admiral, you're not hunting us. We're hunting you." For the first time in his long career, Volker felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Fear. The human fleet hovered silently, their weapons inactive. But their message was clear. They could have destroyed the Empire's forces in seconds, but they hadn't. Because this wasn't about power. It was about proving a point. Elias's image flickered slightly as the communication link ended, his final words echoing across the Empire's bridge. "Run along now, Admiral. We'll be watching." The line went dead. The laughter of humanity. Admiral Volker's hands trembled slightly as he stared at the empty void where the human ships had been. His officers avoided eye contact, shuffling nervously across the bridge, whispering amongst themselves. Silence lingered in the air like a thick fog. Volker straightened his posture, forcing his hands behind his back. His pride refused to let him show weakness, even as unease gnawed at him. "This is a trick," he growled. "They're playing games to unnerve us." But the voice inside his head whispered otherwise. Across the command deck, sensors flickered to life once more. The human ships reappeared, drifting casually along the edges of the Empire's formation, as if they were out for a leisurely cruise. Not a single weapon was raised. "Admiral," one officer stammered, his voice trembling. "They've re-entered formation, but they aren't attacking." Volker squinted at the display. The human ships weaved between the Empire's war vessels, drifting so close that the metal hulls of his own destroyers reflected their sleek forms. It was like watching sharks circle prey. But for some reason, the sharks weren't biting. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission," the communications officer reported. His face was pale, and he hesitated before continuing. "It's a video feed, sir." Volker narrowed his eyes. "Put it through." The screen shifted, and once again, Captain Elias Grant's face appeared. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood his crew, laughing uncontrollably. One officer was wiping tears from his eyes, while another clutched his stomach as if he couldn't breathe. Even Elias himself had to pause, pressing his palm against his forehead to contain his laughter. "Admiral Vokar." Elias grinned, pointing at the screen as if addressing an old friend. "You should see the look on your face right now." Vokar's jaw clenched. Enough of this nonsense. Elias held up his hands, barely managing to suppress another chuckle. I know. You're trying to be all serious, but come on. Did you really think we'd just stand there and let you blast us into dust?" The crew behind Elias erupted into laughter once more, and Vokar could hear snickering from his own officers attempting to stifle their amusement. Vokar's glare swept across the bridge, and the laughter died instantly. His officers snapped back to their stations, keeping their eyes glued to their consoles. Elias leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice. "I'll level with you, Admiral. We could end this right now. You know it. I know it. But honestly, this is too much fun." Vokar's eye twitched. "You mock the Empire at your peril, Captain." "Oh, don't take it personally," Elias replied, waving dismissively. "You're just the latest in a long line of invincible fleets. You all seem to think that big guns and scary ships mean you're unstoppable." His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, the light-hearted tone faded just a little. "But we're not like the others. We didn't build bigger guns, Admiral. We built smarter ones." Behind him, a holographic image of a sleek, unfamiliar device appeared, spinning slowly. It pulsed faintly with blue energy, intricate and compact, nothing like the crude, oversized weapons that lined the Empire's warships. "We call it phase shift technology," Elias explained. "Your weapons? They passed right through us. And the best part," he grinned, "we don't need to fire back. We just have to wait until you run out of ammo." Vokar's fists tightened behind his back. The weight of the situation pressed down harder with every passing second. His fleet, the pride of the Empire, was powerless. "You expect me to believe you've achieved this level of technology?" Vokar sneered. "Your kind barely escaped your own atmosphere a few centuries ago." Elias leaned forward, smirking. "You know, Admiral, that's the thing about humans. When we're backed into a corner, we evolve. Fast." The screen flickered, and suddenly, dozens of human faces filled the display. Captains from other ships, colony leaders, and soldiers, all smiling. One officer, a young woman with short-cropped hair, raised a glass of what appeared to be whiskey. "To the Empire," she cheered sarcastically, downing the drink as the others laughed. Vokar's rage boiled beneath the surface. His lips curled into a snarl. "This mockery will not save you." Elias grinned, holding up his own glass. "Admiral, you're missing the point." He raised the glass higher, and the laughter in the background faded. "It already has." Vokar's breath caught in his throat. In that instant, he understood. This wasn't a show of power. It was a demonstration of dominance. The humans weren't simply defying the Empire. They were teaching them a lesson. "You have two choices, Admiral," Elias said, his tone softening. "You can leave and tell the Emperor what happened here, or you can stay, and we'll see just how long your fleet lasts without fuel or weapons." The line went silent. Vokar's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced his voice to remain calm. "All ships," he ordered coldly. "Prepare for retreat." His officers nodded, but there was no mistaking the relief in their eyes. As the Empire's fleet slowly turned, human ships hovered quietly, watching like sentinels. No shots were fired. The laughter echoed across the bridge one last time as Vokar's fleet vanished into the void, leaving behind nothing but the sound of humanity's victory. The unleashing of Project Iron Teeth. Admiral Vokar sat rigidly in his command chair, eyes fixed on the vast starfield as his fleet drifted further from the human colony. His grip on the armrests tightened with every second. The human laughter still echoed in his mind, a humiliating reminder of the encounter he couldn't explain or forget. His fleet had been humiliated without a single shot fired in return. It was unthinkable. The Empire's might, its iron fist that had crushed empires across the galaxy, had been reduced to the butt of a joke. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Voker's second-in-command, a pale, wiry alien named Dractyl, approached hesitantly. "Admiral, we've received orders from the Emperor," he said carefully, glancing at the unread message on his datapad. Voker didn't look up. "I know what it says," he muttered, eyes narrowing at the blank void ahead. "Sir." Voker's gaze shifted to the faint silhouette of the human fleet in the distance. They hadn't followed. They didn't need to. They'd already won this battle. But Voker wasn't about to let that stand. "They're testing us," Voker growled, more to himself than to Dractyl. "They're hiding something bigger than we realize." Dractyl hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Respectfully, Admiral, their technology is advanced, but they are still human. They bleed like any other species." Voker's eyes darkened. "You're wrong." Dractyl frowned. Voker rose from his chair, stepping toward the center of the bridge. His officers watched nervously as he spoke, his voice cold and steady. "We underestimated them once. We won't make that mistake again." He turned to his weapons officer. "Charge the long-range cannons. Prepare for full bombardment." Dractyl's eyes widened. "Admiral." Voker cut him off with a sharp glare. "I don't care if they laughed at us. I want that colony reduced to ash." The bridge fell into a tense silence as the crew carried out his orders. Panels flickered to life, and the Empire's massive warships began reorienting toward the human colony in the distance. But then, something changed. Without warning, the lights flickered. A strange hum vibrated through the ship, faint but steady. Dractyl's eyes darted nervously around the room. "Admiral, our systems are acting strangely. Energy levels are fluctuating." Before Voker could respond, the lights dimmed further, leaving the bridge bathed in an eerie red glow. Warning symbols flashed across every console. "Admiral," a technician shouted from the far side of the bridge, "we've lost control of our primary weapon systems." Voker's gaze sharpened. "How is that possible?" I don't know." The technician stammered. "It's as if something is overriding our commands." A sudden, piercing sound filled the air, a low, grinding growl that echoed across every speaker on the ship. The crew froze, eyes widening as the sound grew louder, sharper. Voker's expression hardened. He recognized that sound. Laughter. Not through communications. It was coming from inside the ship. Traced the source. Voker snapped, his voice echoing over the eerie chuckles. His officers scrambled to comply, but no matter what console they accessed, the result was the same. No trace, no origin point. And then, without warning, a new voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral Voker, we told you to leave. Now you get to see what happens when you don't listen." The voice wasn't mocking this time. It was calm, cold, and unmistakably human. Voker's fists clenched as he recognized Captain Elias Grant's voice. Project Iron Teeth was no longer a secret. The displays on the bridge shifted, showing live footage from the edges of the fleet. The human ships, previously distant and passive, had vanished. In their place, massive black shapes emerged from the shadows of space. Voker's eyes narrowed as he stared at the unknown vessels. They weren't like the smaller human ships they had encountered earlier. These ships were enormous, jagged in design, and brimming with an energy that made the Empire's warships seem ancient by comparison. "They were holding back," Dractyl whispered, his voice trembling. This was their real fleet all along." Voker's lips thinned. He refused to let fear take hold. "It doesn't matter how big their ships are. We outnumber them 20-1. But as he spoke, the human vessels flickered, their forms distorting and shifting like mirages. And then, without firing a single shot, they disappeared again. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is gone," the sensor officer reported, his voice cracking. "No," Volker replied darkly, his gaze fixed on the empty void. "They're still here. We just can't see them." Before anyone could respond, the Empire's warships began losing power one by one. Engines sputtered and died. Weapons systems collapsed. Shields flickered out, leaving the once invincible fleet vulnerable and exposed. The lights dimmed to near-total darkness, leaving only the red emergency beacons pulsing faintly along the bridge. And then the voices returned. One by one, the human captains broadcast on an open frequency, their words laced with quiet amusement. "Your guns don't work. Your shields are gone. We could end this right now, but we want you to understand something first." A final message appeared on every screen. "Run." Volker's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay composed. "Retreat," he ordered through gritted teeth. As the Empire's fleet slowly turned, the human ships emerged once more, escorting them out like wolves herding prey. Empire's retreat, the first humbling. The Empire's once mighty fleet drifted helplessly through the void, surrounded by silence. Engines sputtered and flickered, barely sustaining enough power to limp away from the human colony. The glow of distant stars stretched endlessly across the viewport, but none of it felt vast enough to mask the shame that pressed down on Admiral Volker's shoulders. His warships, once feared across the galaxy, now resembled wounded beasts, lumbering, exposed, and humiliated. Human ships flanked them on either side. Not with weapons drawn, nor with aggression. They didn't need to. The human vessels, sleek and silent, floated alongside the Empire's fleet with unsettling ease, keeping pace with the wounded destroyers like predators, walking lazily beside prey too broken to flee. On the bridge of Volker's command ship, the air was thick with unease. His officers kept their heads down, avoiding his gaze. They worked in silence, not out of discipline, but because no one dared to speak. The only sound was the faint hum of the emergency lights flickering overhead. "Admiral." Volker barely turned his head. His second-in-command, Draktil, stood at his side, eyes fixed on the displays in front of them. "Scanners confirm that the human vessels are hurting us." Volker's expression darkened. "I can see that, Draktil. They've disabled our long-range communications. We can't send for reinforcements. We can't even contact the Emperor directly." Volker's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the console. "They want us isolated." Draktil hesitated before responding, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why haven't they destroyed us, Admiral?" Volker didn't answer immediately. He had asked himself the same question 100 times since the battle, if it could even be called that. The human fleet had emerged, humiliated the Empire, and now seemed content to watch them crawl away. It was insulting. "They don't see us as a threat," Volker muttered bitterly, glaring at the nearest human ship through the viewport. "They could end this at any moment, but they're letting us leave. Not because they respect us, but because they don't think we're worth the effort." Draktil swallowed hard, his discomfort plain. The bridge remained quiet, until a sudden ping echoed through the comm systems. A message. "Sir," the comms officer said cautiously. "It's from the lead human vessel, Captain Elias Grant." Volker's jaw tightened. "Put him through." The screen above the command chair flickered to life, and there he was again, Captain Elias, sitting comfortably in his chair, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "Admiral Volker," Elias greeted with a small nod. "Good to see you're still in one piece." Volker's glare could have melted steel. "Spare me your games, Captain. Why haven't you finished us?" Elias took a slow sip of his coffee, letting the question hang in the air for several agonizing moments. "Because, Admiral, we wanted to make sure you understood exactly what's happening here." Volker leaned forward slightly, his tone icy. "Enlighten me." Elias smiled faintly, setting his cup aside. "You see, Admiral, This isn't just about us winning. It's about sending a message to the galaxy, to you, to your Emperor, and to anyone else who thinks humanity is just another stepping stone for the Empire." Voker's eyes narrowed. "We could have wiped you out," Elias continued, his voice calm but firm. "But if we did, you'd be martyrs. The Empire would spin the story, call us barbarians, and send twice the fleet next time. So instead, we decided to do something far worse." Elias leaned closer to the screen, his expression hardening. "We broke your pride." The words hit like a hammer. Voker stiffened, his officers shifting uncomfortably behind him. "You'll return to your Emperor," Elias said, his gaze unwavering. "And when he asks why you failed to conquer a handful of human colonies, what will you tell them?" Voker remained silent, his teeth grinding together. Elias's smile returned, but there was no mockery in it this time, only certainty. "You'll tell him the truth, that for the first time in the Empire's history, you met a species that didn't just resist." His eyes burned with quiet defiance. "You met a species that laughed." The screen went dark. For a long time, no one on the bridge spoke. Voker sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly. His pride screamed for vengeance, but the cold logic in his mind knew better. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. But today, there was nothing left to do but retreat. "Maintain course," Voker ordered, his voice low but firm. "Return to Imperial space." The bridge lights flickered as the ship's engines groaned, powering up just enough to sustain their journey home. Behind them, the human ships remained still, watching silently as the once mighty fleet of the Galactic Empire fled. A new galactic order. The Imperial fleet limped back to its borders under the cold watch of 1,000 stars. The once mighty Armada, symbols of galactic dominance, now drifted in silence. The edges of their hulls bore no scars, no burns from human weapons, because no battle had truly been fought. Admiral Voker sat alone in his quarters, staring out of the narrow viewport. Beyond the glass, the faint glow of Earth's colony flickered in the distance as the fleet retreated further into the void. The planet's lights looked small, insignificant. And yet those lights had forced the most feared military force in the galaxy to flee. It wasn't the damage that haunted Voker. It was the laughter. That sound had not only echoed across the comms, but had embedded itself deep in the fabric of his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces, those human captains, their eyes alight with amusement, their confidence unshaken in the face of overwhelming firepower. He should have destroyed them. He should have crushed that colony beneath the weight of the Empire's warships. But no matter how much Voker tried to convince himself, he knew the truth. They had let him go. The door to his quarters slid open with a soft hiss. Draktil stepped inside cautiously, datapad in hand. "Admiral," he said softly, "we've re-entered Imperial space. The fleet is regrouping, but—" Voker glanced at him. "But—" Draktil shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the datapad. "Reports are already spreading. The crew, they're talking. Some officers have begun to question why we didn't fire more aggressively, why we left without resistance." Voker's gaze hardened. "They'll have their answers soon enough." Draktil hesitated. "And the Emperor?" Voker's hands tightened around the glass of water on his desk until it cracked. He forced himself to relax, setting it down carefully. "The Emperor will not be pleased," Voker admitted, rising from his seat. "But I will not lie to him." Draktil looked surprised. "Sir." Voker stepped forward, staring out the viewport once more. "I've served this empire for decades. I have fought in more battles than I can count, but never have I faced an enemy like them." He turned, locking eyes with Draktil. "If we lie, if we pretend that this was a simple retreat, the Empire will march blindly into its next failure. And when that day comes, we won't return." Draktil swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Prepare the report," Voker said, his voice low. "Detail everything. The human technology, their tactics, And most importantly, he looked down at the datapad on Draktil's belt. Include the recordings of their laughter. Draktil blinked in confusion. Their laughter, sir. Voker's lips pressed into a thin line. Yes. Let the Emperor hear it. Let the entire High Council listen. I want them to understand the kind of enemy we face. 3 days later, the Empire's War Council convened in the Imperial capital. In the grand, gilded chambers, the most powerful leaders of the galaxy gathered, each one draped in elaborate robes, symbols of conquest etched across their chests. The Emperor sat at the center, his gaze cold and unforgiving. Admiral Voker stood before them, his hands clasped behind his back as the recordings from the encounter played across the room. Laughter filled the chamber. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some exchanged glances, while others frowned deeply. When the recording ended, the room fell into silence. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Is this a joke, Admiral? Voker met his gaze without hesitation. No, Your Majesty. One of the council members scoffed. Surely you don't expect us to believe that a handful of human ships humiliated the entire 12th Fleet without a single casualty. I do, Voker replied bluntly. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Emperor's expression darkened. Explain yourself. Voker stepped forward, placing his hands on the edge of the long council table. The humans are not like the other species we have conquered. They are unpredictable. Where others beg for mercy, they laugh. Where others crumble beneath our firepower, they stand. His gaze swept across the council, locking eyes with each member in turn. They do not fear us, and that makes them more dangerous than any armada. The Emperor's eyes flickered with something unreadable, curiosity, perhaps even amusement. Are you suggesting, the Emperor asked slowly, that these humans could pose a threat to the Empire? Voker exhaled. Not yet, but if left unchecked, they will. A heavy silence hung over the room. Finally, the Emperor leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Then we will watch them, the Emperor said calmly. Study them. Let them think they have won this battle. He smiled faintly, the edge of his mouth curling in quiet calculation. And when the time is right, we will remind them why the galaxy fears the Empire. But even as the Emperor spoke, Voker felt the weight in his chest grow heavier. Something had shifted. The Empire's confidence remained. Yet for the first time, doubt had been planted like a seed deep within the heart of its leaders. And Voker knew that seed would grow. Because no matter how far the Empire's fleets traveled, the sound of human laughter would always follow.